welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday. My name is Michelle, aka the Ignited Teacher. And on Teaching Tip Tuesday, what I do is I help you to close your learning gaps. I'm tongue tied. Your learning gaps by providing research based math strategies and effective strategies that can be implemented in your classroom the very next day. So that's what I do here on Teaching Tip Tuesday. And if you are new here, thank you for tuning in to my live stream. I moved it up an hour early. Um, it used to be later, but I just decided to go ahead and move it up to 7:30. So we'll be here. It's a 30-minute show from 7:30 to 8 and give you some time to relax. And if you're not new and you tune in and you catch me on a replay, thank you for being a part of my community. And what I do on Teaching Tip Tuesday is I multi-stream to different platforms. So if you catch me on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, thank you. And if you leave a comment in the comment section, definitely I'll get them. It might be slow going. This is technology. But even on the replay, if you have some questions, you can leave a comment in the comment section and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But thank you for tuning in for this segment of Teaching Tip Tuesday. And if you find yourself not being able to catch me live, you can always hop on over to YouTube and find all of my Teaching Tip Tuesday episodes there. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and hit the bell notification so you'll know when I upload videos and go live. So YouTube is where it's at. Some people catch me on Facebook, but the thing about Facebook is that feed continues to move and it pushes the videos down. I try to pin the most recent Teaching Tip Tuesday to my Facebook profile, and on Twitter, a tweet, those tweets just keep going, so it may be hard for you to find. So if you're on YouTube, definitely search for the Ignited Teacher. I'm the only one on there for the time being, and you can search on there for me and go ahead and subscribe, like the video, because it helps getting the video seen across YouTube, and hit the bell notification so that you'll get notified for when I go live or upload videos. So today's episode of Teaching Tip Tuesday is about simplifying fractions, and not just simplifying fractions for your tier 1 students. And if you're new to the teaching profession, we're not gonna, tier 1 students are your students that are on grade level or maybe above grade level, but we're talking about simplifying fractions and tips for struggling learners. What do you do when those kids don't get simplifying fractions? A lot of teachers tend to actually use the greatest common factor and not a conceptual model. So that's the problem that we're solving tonight. And I'm going to give you some tips. I know that it's summertime. As you can see, if you were watching my live stream, you saw that it had Teaching Tip Tuesday in the summertime. I have shifted to my summer schedule, so I'll be going live more regularly in anticipation of the new school year. This school year, next school year, we're going to have a lot of learning gaps. Not learning loss, learning gaps, because there are things where, children checked out. They're at the height of the pandemic. A lot of our students, even now, like I was talking to one of the students, he wasn't my student. He was like, I'm working. So a lot of our kids have checked out, especially at the high school level, where they are working to help keep their families afloat. So we are going to have ways to where we actually can close these gaps with these students. And it's not going to be an easy task, but I can tell you, if you continue with it and find ways to reach the children and to close those gaps and to close them quickly, you can make gains with them and get the kids back on track. So that's what we're talking about, just simplifying fractions tonight. So, um, with simplifying fractions, and I'm just going to give my story with my son. My son was one of those struggling learners in math. And truth be told, if you haven't heard my story, that's how I got into this whole working with kids that struggle, because my son was one of those children that struggled with math. He didn't see how the math connected. And at the time, I don't even think I was teaching math at the time. At the time, he was in fourth grade where he was learning fractions. And I came up with the fraction tiles because his teacher was trying to get him to learn simplifying fractions with the greatest common factor. And it did not work for him. So I pulled out some color tiles. I think I might have been teaching fourth grade at the time. I don't even think I was teaching math. And I started rearranging the tiles for him. And what I found out at that kitchen table many, many years ago, because my son is 27, so I thought I turned this off, but obviously I didn't. Many, many years ago, I found out that when you're simplifying fractions, division is division, no matter how you apply it. It's still separating part things into equal groups. And I'm going to say that again. It's just separating things into equal groups, whether that be the numerator and denominator. And once you understand that concept, then you definitely know that um, division never changes. And that's why it's so important. And when we talk about intervention, intervention does not have a grade level. A lot of teachers say, well, I'm working on fifth grade curriculum for my intervention. Then you're not doing intervention. Intervention is meeting a child where they're at, and remediation is on grade level content. That's the difference. So if you're saying that, oh, for intervention, we're working on a lesson that I did, and that's why, in my group, that's where we're going to work. It's not intervention. And that's what sets response to intervention and math intervention apart from guided math and math workshop, because they use a small group model to deliver instruction. And they may remediate, but they do not close gaps. If you're not meeting the child where they are, then you are not conducting or implementing your interventions. So, with that, simplifying fractions, I teach a conceptual model. And for example, and I'm going to show you in one of my blog posts, it can be done with the area model. It can be done with fraction tiles. It can be done with anything, long as you're grouping it. So what I found out is that when we simplify fractions, we don't reduce them, because when you say reducing fractions, you're conveying to the students that, oh, it's getting smaller. No, it's not getting smaller. Actually, the parts get larger, because it goes from a part of a whole to a part of a set. And that's the progression. So when kids are able to recognize fractions as a part of a set, I think that's in third grade, or it may still be in fourth grade, but it helps with simplifying fractions, because it goes from 3/9 to being 3 parts of 9 to 1 part of a third. And that's the progression. I've been reading this book, Formative Assessment, and it talks about the progressions for mastery and what does it look like. So in simplifying fractions, that progression and what you're looking for is in mastery. Does the child have the prerequisite skill to rearrange 3/9 to part of a set? That is the progression. And I was sharing with one of my colleagues this morning about the definition of progression. It's how expertise changes over time and how the child grows and the understanding of a concept becomes more complex. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one of my blog posts. And I talk about this in this blog, and I wrote this so many years ago. I know it's been at least 5, probably 6 years since I wrote this. But it talks about what does it mean to really simplify a fraction. Now, a lot of teachers are like, no, you just find the greatest common factor. But what does that actually look like? What does it mean to your students when you say simplify? It should invoke something. And when you say simplify a fraction, some kids are like, well, I don't know what that means. And that's the funny thing about it, is that they should know what it means. So in this blog post, and if you're looking or thinking, why, where is this blog post located at, you can go to fuelgreatminds.com. If you're on YouTube or even on Facebook, if you go to theignitedteacher.com, you can hit the blog and it'll take you over to the website where I house all my lesson plans and products. So here, let me see. It did this last week. I'm going to refresh it to see if it's going to move. Nope, I'm going to have to stop mirroring and start it up again. I don't know why it does that. All right, so here I talk about, that part to whole, and then going from part to whole to part of a set. And that's what it means to actually simplify fractions. And I did that with color tiles. And kids need to understand that, we're going from part to whole to part of a set. And that's why that's important. And I know in maybe the lower grades, they're probably saying, well, thinking, why do the children have to know this? Because it builds that progression of learning that kids need to be able to do this. I know middle school kids that can't simplify fractions. I know high school kids that can't simplify fractions. And it's really concerning because a lot of times we think kids may not know a concept. For example, slope-intercept form has to be in its simplest form. And when kids don't understand that, it causes problems. So here, it talks about the part of the set and going to part of a whole. And that's the important part in actually understanding, those real basic concepts, and especially with unit fractions. Like when you're teaching your struggling learners, they have to understand unit fractions, and that's the bottom line. The unit fraction is the foundation, understanding what unit are you working with. And I did that work with my kids in intervention my last year in 5th grade. And my students really understood what it meant to actually simplify that fraction and what unit they were working with. Because some kids, we used to ask them, well, what is a third? What does a third look like? They didn't have a clue. And then we say that that unit is just one of what you're working. If you're working with fourths, it's 1/4. If you're working with fifths, it's 1/5. That's huge for children to understand that, because then they'll understand other relationships like fifths and 15ths. What is the relationship between that denominator and that actual other denominator? What happened to it? Did it multiply? Did we have to simplify it? Those are conversations that you get to have when kids really understand, like going from that unit, one unit, to another unit. And it really evolves over time. That's why those learning progressions are very, very important. So, just to recap, some of the tips that you can work on, like especially this summer, because I know a lot of you all are going to need some help and support with bridging these gaps, because fractions, I'm telling you, that's a lifelong process. It is. They will be dealing with fractions, and I've heard people say that fractions were the gateway to algebra, and I agree, because if they cannot simplify fractions and understand, there's no amount of graphing calculator that's actually going to help with that. So the first tip is getting your kids to understand what the unit is. That's the first tip. If they can understand a unit fraction, that's half the battle. And constantly asking them good questions about what unit are we working with. So for example, if we're working with halves, how many parts is that? How many parts are there in a half? How many parts are there in a third? What does it look like as a fraction wheel? What does it look like as the measurement model? Because a lot of times lower grade teachers work with fraction wheels and now with the tape diagram. But here's the thing, we never take that jump to where the measurement model is used in measurement and geometry. Like we don't know anything other than a fraction wheel. So then you wonder why the geometry is low, because we haven't used fractions in understanding capacity. We haven't um, used the fractions, like especially when they start talking about density and things like that, and the water being displaced. The kids have to understand those things, and then fractions support your decimals. So when you give the kids the real foundation and understanding how many parts that is, that's huge with those unit fractions. Then secondly, make sure your kids have a foundation with understanding equal groups. It goes back to the division. You may have to go back and support them with the division and talk about sharing. And I know as a 5th grade teacher, you don't want to do that. And I know as a middle or high school teacher, but I had to, with my 9th graders, I had to go back and actually make sure that they understood what was the meaning of multiplication, because a lot of them couldn't tell me because they couldn't remember. And I was like, if I say 3 groups of 2, what does that mean? And the kids were like, I don't know. But it was important with the distributive property and them understanding division as sharing. It will help support them with going from part of a whole to part of a set, because they know that they're sharing equally, and the amount that they have in each group, that's your greatest common factor. So the kids, I've had kids get really, really good with it to where they could simplify in their heads. And I'm not talking about the top of the top. I'm talking about children that struggle. They could look at a fraction and really understand that it's not in simplest form and how to picture it in their mind. And the third tip is to build upon the patterns. For example, relationships of numbers. For example, if you have three is a prime number. So it's factors when you have to move the kids from the conceptual to the abstract. Three is a prime number. Understanding that prime meaning that it only has itself and one as factors. So if you have to simplify ninths. What is a factor of nine? Three. We can skip count. And all those things come into play when you're talking about relationships of numbers and them being able to see numbers differently and how they connect and build and create other numbers. So that's all I have for Teaching Tip Tuesday. I hope that those tips were helpful for you. If you need more support, I have a Math Intervention Academy, and if you go to theignitedteacher.com, I'm also hosting a fraction series. If you're on YouTube, it is the link in the chat. And I'm hosting a fraction series where I go more in depth with this. It is a 3 training session fraction series for 1 hour, so you'll get 3 hours of PD for it. We talk about simplifying fractions and creating equivalent fractions through multiplication and division. So if you're interested in that, you can hop on over to the Ignited Teacher and or go to the chat on YouTube and click on the link and register there. I only have enough slots for 30 teachers, and I think right now I have maybe 15 teachers signed up. But as the month goes on, those slots I am predicting are going to be filled. So if you're interested in signing up and registering for this fraction series, you need to get in, because once I hit 30, I am going to actually shut down the registration, because that's all I can possibly handle with us going into that much detail and depth with the fractions. So you can register today. It's called Fraction Strategies for Struggling Learners. We'll be talking about progressions and formative assessment and just different things. It's not just your old regular, I'm going to actually, I keep saying actually, that where I'm just going to give you fraction strategies. No, I'm going to give you tips for helping you to close gaps, because you're going to need it for next school year. And let me see. I think I'm going to take you to the page. I don't know why this thing keeps freezing. It does this when I'm on here. So this is the sales page. It's on the ignitedteacher.com. So it's June 14th and 14th, 21st, and 28th. So June 14th, we'll talk about unit fractions. On the 21st, we'll talk about generating equivalent fractions through multiplication and division, and then we'll wrap it up with adding and subtracting fractions using conceptual models and the algorithm. So you definitely want to sign up. It's going to help you to improve your conceptual understanding of how to teach fractions if that's one of the things that you're struggling with, and use learning progressions for fractions, which I told you we'll talk about progressions and how to address misconceptions and identify student strength and previous learning experience to increase mastery. So kids come are not blank slates. A lot of them just have a lot of different things in their heads, and we have to actually pull it out and help them organize and make sense of it. So you are going to want to register today for that fraction strategies for struggling learners, and I hope to see your name on my list for the fraction strategies workshop. I'm really looking forward. It's a virtual workshop and it'll be a replay afterwards, but you want to get in before it fills up. So thank you for being a part of my community and sharing this 30 minutes of your time. You can't get it back with me for Teaching Tip Tuesday, and I'll see you all next week in my live stream. Bye bye.